once again, Fernando, congratulations. I think it's a massive achievement, the publication of your book. Congratulations to Peter as well, the former supervisor. I think everyone that knows Fernando genuinely takes pride in. Anyone who's also involved in research understands the enormous sacrifices that go into completing a PhD, publishing, etc., etc. In my own research, I came across information or became more aware of Plan Condor based on the connections between the Venezuelan, the Cubans that were living in Venezuela in the 1970s in particular, some of them who became involved in the intelligence services. And continuing to follow developments in Venezuela and what we know now as the pink tide, there are certainly many or several connections and I guess reoccurring themes. Now, if we go back to the era that Fernando has been studying Plan Condor, we know that this is an era that follows the progressive leftist government of Salvador Allende in Chile, the attempt of the Frente Amplio to win elections in Uruguay, a progressive government in Brazil, and then the coordinated efforts of the political right together with the United States to persecute key leftists and progressive leaders throughout the region. Now, that was the context of the Cold War, but I certainly have never accepted the view that, once the Cold War was over, we have turned a major page in Latin America. And that certainly, I think there's enough evidence to suggest that that's simply not the case. And what the political right in the United States has preferred to do is carry out soft coups, carry out coups which are much more, I guess, sophisticated. And obviously when that hasn't worked, then they've relied on sort of the old school tactics, dragging out Celaya at 2 o'clock in the morning in his pajamas and putting him in on an aeroplane to Costa Rica, as was the case with the coup in Honduras. Venezuela, 2002, was, I think, a quite clear example where we begin to see some sort of coordinated regional efforts. Apparently there were, or it is understood that there were Central American snipers that were originally involved in the creating the chaos and the shootings that took place during the actual coup. As Eva Gollinger and other researchers declassifying US government documents have highlighted, the United States was certainly involved in funding the political right, sections of the political right in Venezuela, and were also in contact with the Venezuelan military. And there's also an interesting Colombian connection, and I think we were discussing that with Fernando yesterday, the growing sort of presence of Colombia, looking at Colombia and Uribe, the ultra-right in Colombia as a sort of a strategic point which can be utilized to support or coordinate certain regional actions. If we move on a little bit further, in 2004 there was the arrest of approximately 100 or I think 130 Colombian paramilitaries that were organizing to carry out an assassination against the Venezuelan president at the time. We also had a situation, there was also a situation where a FARC spokesperson was basically plucked, kidnapped at the streets of Caracas, and smuggled out of the country into the United States. Despite what you may read in the media, here in the media, the FARC prior to 2001 had representatives throughout Latin America that did recognize them as an insurgency. Others obviously didn't, but it's quite a complex situation. Now, if we fast forward and continue moving forward, we have a situation in Ecuador in 2010 it's amazing that if you almost blink, you missed it. But in Ecuador in 2010, the progressive government of Rafael Correa found itself in a situation where it questioned the funding that a certain section of the police force was receiving from the United States. And what proceeded to occur then was that President Correa decided to negotiate with these police officers, and they in turn decided to kidnap him in a military hospital for, I think, approximately 24 hours or maybe a little bit longer. The conclusion to that episode was that thanks to special forces, Ecuadorian special military forces, they were able to actually rescue the president out of that hospital. There was a gun battle which took place. Some 3 military personnel were killed. And it was remarkable. I mean, this was, again, almost, a military coup taking place. The president has to be rescued by an elite military unit. There's footage of this gun battle taking place. And fast forward a little bit further, there was actually an investigation, a Senate investigation in Ecuador regarding, who was behind this situation, this attempted coup. And again, there were, the usual suspects that did begin to, their names popped up in the investigation. There were links with contacts between US officials, etc., etc. And again, we keep fast forwarding to Paraguay, 2012. That was certainly not as violent as the situation that occurred in Ecuador. But even the governments of Chile and Colombia basically put out a statement saying that what had taken place was an unconstitutional coup, a soft coup. This was the Colorado Party, who had been in power for something like 50 years under the Stroessner dictatorship. And because a massacre had taken place between some landless peasants and a local police force, all of a sudden the political party that had been fundamental to the Stroessner dictatorship, which killed tens of thousands of people, it's probably one of, if not the bloodiest dictatorship in South America during the last 50 years, all of a sudden they were concerned with human rights, and they tried to pin that situation on President Fernando Lugo, who, in my opinion, was in a very difficult situation in trying to negotiate between the harder left forces in his government and the political right. He was trying to find a middle ground. I think it would be fair to say that he was a progressive leader. And in another context, those issues should have been resolved in Paraguay, in a democratic fashion. But same old progressive or leftist governments coming to power in Latin America, even if they're elected democratically, and local political and economic elites will take flights to Washington and complain and cry foul. Brazil 2006, a similar situation. The Senate is used. And to bring things back now to Colombia, and I guess trying to find some sort of links with Plan Condor. If you're not aware, in the last year and a half, there have actually been several assassinations taking place in Venezuela of Chavista leaders, the most famous being Roberto Sierra, who was a member of the Venezuelan National Assembly. He was actually murdered in a very sophisticated operation. His partner was assassinated as well. And there have been other leaders as well, and the accusations, and then the further you begin to investigate, and the further that investigations have actually taken place in Venezuela, we begin to find these Colombian paramilitary elements popping up again. Now, to look forward, I think that given the ongoing economic war in Venezuela, given how the pink tide has acted and has been perceived, and the rather vicious attacks to see an end to these governments, whether it be to defeat them at the ballot box, or to defeat them utilizing the media and then the judicial system, or in the case of Honduras, basically just overthrowing the elected leader of that country. I think that there's certainly going to be a level of resistance which is going to take place, and certainly throughout the region, based on the initial efforts of the Chavez administration, there's also a level of coordination taking place. There's a level of coordination taking place between the political left, and obviously there's a level of coordination taking place with the political right. Now, if the political right perceives or comes to the conclusion that they simply cannot continue defeating the political left and progressive forces using electoral methods, I think what we saw in Honduras and what we saw in Ecuador might very well be the path forward from their point of view. They've certainly done that in Venezuela. They have very heated internal debates whether they should actually wait for the referendum, push for the referendum. What happens if they actually win the referendum? They're going to find themselves in a situation where they're going to have to govern the crisis. So maybe just wait out the crisis and just continue attacking Chavistas and attacking their actual base, continuing to weaken them politically, but also to actually physically target their leadership. And as I said, there was a very good article, if anyone is interested, I can send it to you. There was a very good article published in the Huffington Post where the Venezuelan right passed or attempted to pass legislation, basically giving them amnesty to a long list. It was basically a confession of their political crimes for the past 15 or 16 years. It included using minors to sell drugs and to carry out acts of sabotage, similar tactics that we saw used against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. So I think, as I stated before, I think this is really a situation where the political right tries to interpret the situation in each country and then coordinate their actions. And where they can remove the pink-eyed governments using the ballot box, they will do that. Where they perceive that they can't, they will attempt to use violence. And what the response will be from the political left will obviously vary from country to country. But again, one should not be surprised that I don't want to go as far as to saying there's going to be a second Plan Condor being implemented throughout the region. But again, none of these scenarios should be completely dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you.